Well, welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for joining me. My name is Leon Pittard. I'm the host of Fair Income Radio, broadcasting from the land down under, and I am joined by our friend Barbara Peterson of farmwars.info in the United States of America. Barb, welcome along. Thanks for joining us.
Oh, good to be here, Leon. Another day and another GMO incident.
Yes, great work. Look, you're doing an incredible amount of work on your site, and often when we look at all these different stories that we try and cover when we get together once a month or so, it's virtually impossible to keep track of them all. I mean, what's foremost on your radar at this time? I mean, you're covering so many different angles, and the GMO, the glyphosate. There's more intel all the time showing us that the warnings are really out there for humanity.
Absolutely. We've got a Dr. Don Huber, and this guy, he's got credentials like crazy. He's had over 55 years of experience. He's worked with agricultural diseases. He's worked for the military. He's just really extremely credible, and he's been warning people, just going on and giving interviews, warning people about the dangers of glyphosate and GMOs. And you really seriously have to take him very, very seriously because he knows what he's talking about. And he's an emeritus professor of plant pathology at Purdue. And once he came out he's a whistleblower, and once he came out, with this saying, hey, we found a new pathogen, well, not new to the world, but new to us. We never knew about this, and it's related to glyphosate, and it's really damaging, and it's causing birth defects, it's causing infertility, it's causing all kinds of stuff. And then Purdue, of course, comes out and says, well, he really isn't that good of a guy. He's just being sensational. And Monsanto goes, oh, yeah, he's just, stick to the facts. He's just being sensational. I'm sorry, but this is the go-to guy. 55 years, he's been the go-to guy. He's been in the military. He's been assessing biological threats. He is credible. Now, all of a sudden, he whistleblows and he's not so credible. That's baloney. That is so much baloney. It's ridiculous. This guy, he's right up there. And I'll tell you, the thing that's really got me going with this is people do not understand the gravity of the situation. They really don't. What's happening, as he explains, is that the genetic material is going into the soil. We put it into the soil with each and every GMO crop that we plant. We put that altered transgenic material made in a lab in the soil, and we can't get it out. It horizontally transfers these genes years after you've planted a GMO crop. You can plant another crop there, and that genes will horizontally transfer into that other crop. You can't get rid of it. And that's just the gene transfer issue. Then there's the glyphosate issue. And glyphosate is showing up in the rain, it's showing up in the rivers, the streams, the lakes. It's showing up everywhere. And that has a whole host of endocrine disrupting properties to it. And I've documented on my website I've got several scientists posting, and what they're showing is the correlation between all these diseases that we're getting and the increased usage of glyphosate on these GMO crops. And you can see the charts there. If you go to farmwars.info, you can look at the articles and you can see those charts. And it shows that it goes right along. All the increases in autism, increases in infertility, increases in all of diseases, Alzheimer's, coincide with the increase in glyphosate usage.
And this is incredible. I mean, I note on one of your on one of the articles regarding Dr. Huber, the glyphosate in human urine and dairy cows. Now, it's got 4 different cities there, and the number of I presume that's a number of people tested, but it's got the levels of glyphosate. And this is a thing that I've always thought about with the GMO debate. I mean, the genetic structure and what you were talking about, going into the soil and then transferring into new plants is one thing, but if we look at the glyphosate issue alone, the majority of the reason why they do genetically modify these plants is so that they can freely spray this glyphosate on the plants and basically kill the weeds, but the plant keeps living. Now, or to make it resistant to other pests that might eat it. In other words, it's got a pesticide type bacteria in the plant, so that the only thing that ends up eating those plants really is humanity. Now, that glyphosate and that other pesticide gene that's impregnated in that plant,
BT.
It must have an effect on humanity. And here, he's documented here that the glyphosate levels in human urine. And when you see what glyphosate does to creation, to nature, you can't say that it's not going to affect humanity when the rise of autism it's gone from 10,000 to 1 in 50 or something now. I mean, these are the effects of chemicals in our food, let alone the GMO genetic structure issue.
Absolutely. And it's not getting any less. And they were promising us, oh yes, it's going to be less pesticide usage. How on earth could anybody possibly believe that? With an increase in the usage of glyphosate on these genetically modified crops and the increase of the genetically modified crops. Take alfalfa. Here we have a wonderful plant, alfalfa. You can plant it once. The roots go so deep and so wide that hardly a weed will grow in it. You can't even reseed it because it'll choke it out. So there you have your first year, and it lasts for 6 years, around 6 years, give or take. And you don't have to replant. Now, why on earth would anyone in his right mind buy Roundup Ready alfalfa seed, stick that in the ground, and go ahead and put glyphosate all over it? Why? You don't need it. But they're promising people that they're going to get a bigger yield on their first cutting. Now, if you have somebody that really knows farming and has been in it for several years, they're laughing. They're going, oh, good grief. But now you have the new farmers, and they're going to go ahead and they're going to buy that load of bull. They're going to buy it, and they're going to go ahead and use it. So now you take a perennial plant, you take alfalfa, and everybody uses alfalfa. I don't use it anymore. Everybody uses alfalfa. They're feeding the dairy cows with it. They're feeding horses with it, goats, sheep. Everybody's eating alfalfa. That's a staple. Now you've taken a staple that needed no pesticide and dumped pesticide all over it. And now we are getting pesticides coming out of our ears. We're getting it so bad. And they're dumping it in the rivers. They are dumping glyphosate. Do you know that glyphosate is the only for a weed eradication program in there was 3 counties, Yakima, Benton, and I can't remember, I think Jackson County in Washington. Yeah. They are dumping, for a weed eradication program, they're dumping glyphosate in the river, just wholesale dumping it in the river. And they're not even taking any mind to it. They're not even recording it. They say, okay, we dumped this much in the river. They're not testing the river. Yeah. So now we've got rivers of glyphosate flowing all over the place. And then we had an instance of a higher rate of anencephaly, which is brain damaged babies in those counties. And the only thing that really is the same with all 3 counties is that river flowing through them, and they use that for irrigation.
Yes.
Okay, I'm telling you, it's getting insane. We're getting it in the rain. We're getting it in the water. We're being inundated with this pesticide that they promised was not going to happen.
It's incredible. It's incredible that the wider effects on the ecosystem aren't even considered. I mean, we've been covering here last week that I was talking about the effect on bees, and with GMO, because we've got our most southern state in Australia is called Tasmania, a small state that's actually off the mainland, and the Tasmanian dairy industry is calling for an end to a GMO ban in Tasmania, and what they are wanting is GMO pastures or GMO feed crops to be allowed in because they're saying that they can't compete, right? And this is the way the whole economic strategy works in this competitive type economic system that we have. And it's like they have to keep going with the main flow. But the beekeepers, they're jumping up and down and saying, hang on, no, we don't want any GMO in here because GMO affects our bees. Our bees are under threat because of GMOs. The president of the Tasmanian Beekeepers Association, Lindsay Burke, said that one of the vegetable crops that we pollinate will be devastated because we will not go anywhere near it. We will not go and pollinate if there is GMO crop alongside. We will, because what they're saying is that the GMO crops are actually a threat to their bees. And this is the wider picture, Barb, of the ecological devastation that's taken place as a result of this false science, which is really about corporate monopoly. But it's destroying the natural This is a real environmental issue, not carbon taxes and all that, but this is a real environmental issue that's affecting not just the health of humanity, but look at the tip of the spear in the ecology. The bees, they're under threat.
Oh, absolutely. And one of the reasons why, once you start doing GMOs, because of the effects on the soil, and you've got that glyphosate in the soil, and that's a metal chelator, and it robs the soil of nutrients, what happens is you try and put a normal crop in there. If you don't remediate the soil in some fashion, you try and put a regular crop in there, guess what? It's not going to get up there. It's not going to grow right because the nutrients are being sucked out of it.
Say that again. I want you to go back to that metal chelator. Repeat that again.
Glyphosate is a metal chelator. Therefore, what it does is it binds the nutrients in the soil. And that's what happens to the weeds. That's how it kills the weeds.
It starves them, right? Because the nutrients
can't be taken up. It starves them of nutrients. Absolutely.
And so when you go to plant crops afterwards, unless you remediate the soil and the effects that the glyphosate's had on it, the nutrients are still bound under the soil surface.
Yes, exactly. So now what you have is, if you get a crop at all, you're going to get a nutrient-deficient crop. And you're going to get a crop that isn't really that healthy. It's kind of sparse. You're not going to get a good crop. So people say, okay, well, maybe I need GMOs. So they run over and they buy the GMOs, and of course the GMO crops will grow because they're supposed to be resistant to glyphosate, so they'll grow. But that doesn't mean they're going to have any nutrients in them because the glyphosate is absorbed into the plant. And guess what? It doesn't stop chelating the minerals once it's in the plant. No, it still chelates the minerals, so the plant is nutrient deficient. And then you eat that plant. You can't wash it off. You eat it. So what happens? The minerals inside you are bound. So you can't even get the pathetic amount of minerals that's in the plant already.
Exactly.
So you're starving to death.
Exactly. And when we talk about, when we see things taking place out there in the natural world, whether it be the bees, the moths, the butterflies, the grubs, the worms, we start seeing any of these things dying, they should be alarm bells. I've got a short clip here, Barb, from Marion Hemingway talking about the bee colonies, specifically in the US. You might mute your mic and we'll just go to that and have a chat about it.
It is one of the signs, the really unmistakable signs, that our food system is unsustainable.
Bees are an indicator of environmental quality. When the bees are dying, something's wrong.
We put agencies like the EPA in place to moderate the avarice of corporations, and they have not done it. Instead, they've been corrupted.
We're in a war here, and we're going to lose a percentage of our troops consistently. We're going to keep fighting.
So what is causing colony collapse disorder, and how can it be stopped? To further explore this issue, I'm joined by the director of the film Vanishing of the Bees, investigative journalist and founder of honeycolony.com, Marion Hennigan. Thank you so much for coming on.
Hi, Abby. It's my pleasure.
So can you explain a little bit more in depth about what exactly colony collapse disorder consists of?
Well, with colony collapse, what occurs that in a very short amount of time, let's say a typical hive has about 50,000 bees, and in a very short of time, the worker bees will abandon the brood, which are the babies, and the queen, and so the beekeeper comes upon his hive and it's completely empty.
And so your film exposes very clearly that bees aren't just dying, they're abandoning their hives entirely. Where are they going?
Well, we believe that they're dying. One honeybee cannot live without her hive for more than 24 hours. So here they are flying around in a monoculture where everything looks exactly the same. And they are taking these systemic pesticides back to their hive, and so it affects the future generations. And they kind of get Alzheimer's, where it impacts their navigational capabilities and also impairs their brains.
Your film also explores several theories about what might be causing CCD. Can you outline what those causes might be?
So at first, when we started investigating, we looked at mites. The varroa mite, for instance, is the number one enemy of the honeybee. It came to the United States in the 80s and is now all over the world. We looked at pathogens, viruses, loss of habitat, and of course all of these play into effect, and there's a lot of variables that are all interconnected, but at the root we believe are these systemic pesticides, these neonicotinoids that are nicotine based.
So even though there's been no real conclusive basically correlation between the die-off and pesticides, you think that that's the most likely culprit based on the evidence that you've done?
Well, there's actually, when the film came out, there was no independent research, but now there's research coming out of Yale, out of Harvard. There's plenty of research to back that up. The companies, Syngenta, Bayer, Crop Science, continue to deny it, and the Environmental Protection Agency does not do any independent studies. It's kind of like the fox guarding the hen house, and so they depend on Bayer to come back and say, hey, these products are safe. And so we do not use the precautionary principle in this country.
And so there, Barb, very good information about really the honeybees being under threat. And this should tell us that if the animals in nature, especially the very sensitive ones, in this case being the bees, are dying off, there is something in our environment that's killing them, right? So we look at these neonicotinoids or the glyphosates specifically, and if we look at what they are doing not only to nature, but as you have an article, GMOs and Neurological Disease, ADHD, Autism, Alzheimer's, Schizophrenia and Bipolar by N.L. Swanson. Now, this is very important because in that article you talk about, the writer talks about the thyroid function and the endocrine disrupting properties of glyphosate that can lead to neurological disorders, attention deficit hyperactive disorder, autism, dementia, Alzheimer's, schizophrenia, bipolar. If we look at all of these disorders, these sicknesses, diseases, generally children are the most affected, the young, and that these diseases all have something to do with moods and depression and the state of mind, because the thyroid function actually helps regulate whether or not we feel good and whether or not we feel happy about life. And when we look at the statistics of young people today, many of this current generation are depressed. They don't really want to live. They haven't got any motivation. They're just sort of, they haven't got that edge. They haven't got that edge that young people once did have about life and about a future and about goals and about achieving. And it seems like there's a connection here between, and it has to be a connection between the poisons that are in the food and indeed the state of our young people today, with increases in all of these disorders that are outlined in this article.
Exactly. And when you go to connecting the dots like you have here, and the gal said Alzheimer's, a type of Alzheimer's in bees. Okay,
Yes.
look at the bees, they're getting it. And then you look and you see that glyphosate is an endocrine disruptor, and it can cause, Alzheimer's in people. We are connected with every other living thing on this planet. You can't just take something and say, oh, this is a completely separate unit and we can do whatever we want with this and it's not going to affect anything else. It doesn't work like that. It really doesn't. When we see bees dropping dead, we can expect to see people dropping dead because they're eating the same things.
It's amazing. I mean, according to the New York Times, an estimated 6.4 million children between 4 and 17 had received an ADHD diagnosis. It's a 16% increase since 2007. And so what we see with the graph, we see the increase of glyphosate and these toxic poisons, a multitude of them. It's not just glyphosate, but a combination. And we see the increase, dramatic increase. I mean, honestly, isn't this sad? Millions of children. And that's just one disorder. That's only ADHD, let alone bipolar, let alone autism. And this is all connected with the inputs. And as Marion was pointing out there, is that when a bee leaves a hive, if they've got Alzheimer's, they don't know how to go home. I mean, look at the analogy with family. Families are breaking down because young people are leaving home and they're losing their orientation. There can be this young Alzheimer's, if you like, is manifest in autism, bipolar, and these other conditions.
Yeah, I'm really, the children, really, seriously, if you look at it, I go to the store and I walk through it and I only get certain things and I hang out at the organic section. But I look at people, I really look at them, and then I look at what's in their shopping carts. We don't have a chance. I looked at this one gal was there, and she was in line behind me, and she had a very cute little boy there and in the shopping cart, and she had all the GMO queen, like just about everybody else is, and all this stuff, packaged stuff, and the little boy, he was looking at me, and then I'm taking all this organic veggies and fruits and putting it in, and all this stuff, and nice honey and all that, and he's looking at me, he's going, "Is that yours? That's yours?" And I said, "Yes." And he goes, "This is mine." I said, "Well, you can have that because I don't want it. I want this." And he says, "Well, I want that too." And my mother's going, "Be quiet, be quiet, be quiet." I mean, dysfunctional. I mean, it's like, it was so sad because I saw this little child, and if given the opportunity, if given the chance, would start eating very, very well and would grow up to be, fully functional, most likely, and alert, cognizant. But now this child is growing up in a family where he's going to be fed nothing but poison. So what's that going to do to that bright little child? That's going to dumb that little child down to the point where they're going to be a cog in a machine, if they can even get a job. Most likely, maybe won't even be able to get a job, just become another welfare recipient because you can't do anything else, or end up on the street or doing some low-level McDonald's job and continuing to shove the poison in their mouths. And that's what they want. That's what they want because the corporations that run this system have to make money. And the only way they can make money is if we're sick and we continue on following them and buying their poison the cheapest way they can make it, and if we just comply.
Look at the cheapest food. I mean, you're speaking about the, looking at the shopping trolley. The cheapest food that people can buy is the most poisonous.
Yes.
You can, for $1. I mean, I go down the road looking at billboards and they're advertising these fast food hamburgers in these McDonald's or Hungry Jack's or whatever for $1 or whatever it is, And I look at that and I think, there must be so many people get sucked into that to think, we're driving along, so we'll just go in and get some of these as, 5 of us here, it'll only cost us $5, for example. Whereas to go and buy good food, obviously, it costs a lot more. And so on one of these graphs, you've got in this article, it's got the autism prevalence per 1,000 plotted against glyphosate applied to corn and soy. And, I mean, the correlation's there. It's just incredible to see the rise in autism along with glyphosate. And even if you go down to the next one, it's got number of children with autism, 6 to 21, and even then you go down to the elderly, deaths from Alzheimer's plotted against glyphosate use in corn and soy, or deaths from Parkinson's disease, deaths from senile dementia. They're all showing the exact same trend. Now, this would be a climate change propagandist greatest thing if he was on this side of the fence, because every one of these little graphs show the direct correlation. And the thing is, Barb, that this corn and soy is impregnated right through right through processed food, and we need to be very vigilant looking at what's in what we're buying.
Oh, yeah, really. And, you know, the sugary drinks and the sugary cereals and everything they're feeding children, if you get, even if you get sugar and it's genetically modified sugar beet, unless you get pure cane sugar. But your soft drink companies, they don't use pure cane sugar. They use genetically modified sugar beet or high fructose corn syrup. Okay, and the cereals, high fructose corn syrup, genetically modified sugar beets, and soy lecithin, all of this stuff, it's all genetically modified, and that's all the kids are getting. In fact, you go to the formulas, and the kids, they're saying, oh, you can't breastfeed. Oh, well, you got to go to work, so you can't even get a pump and, you know, pump yourself or whatever you're supposed to. Get formula. Let's just get it right off the box and pump it into our kids. They're starting out as a baby being poisoned. And we wonder why the society is getting sick. We have the incidence of children being born sickly and ill and having all sorts of problems and diseases has never been higher. And it's getting higher and higher. It's getting worse and worse. It's because we're pumping all this stuff, but we're disconnected. We can't see the connection. We've got all this media telling us, you know, that, oh, it's good for you, it's healthy for you. And we've got sports personalities, you know, pumping up the high fructose corn syrup beverages and all that. Oh, yeah, this is really good for you. Drink this, you know, and you're going to be able to go all day long, until you crash. But, you know, and people are buying it. They're buying it, and it's a disconnect. They don't have the time, they don't have the energy or the inclination to do the research to find out exactly what they're putting in their mouths, and they'd much rather, because it tastes good, go ahead and eat it. Well, it tastes good, it's okay.
And they become addicted to it.
Yes, absolutely addicted to it. And they keep on, and this is bad. You know, it's like cigarettes. Once they were found out and to be, you know, not good for you, people kept on smoking. Aspartame, found out, well, that's genetically modified bacteria feces, and it's a neurotoxin. People are addicted to it. It's okay. Well, keep on. And they just keep on doing it.
Yeah. Well, I want to encourage our listeners to go to your website, farmwars.info, because there's another article here that I'm looking at that we haven't had time to cover, but once again by N.L. Swanson, mounting evidence that GMO crops can cause infertility and birth defects. And this is one of the, look, this is just, I mean, it's really sad. And how do you say which is the worst, you know, on young children, old people, or fetuses unborn? But here it goes through and really describes that the endocrine disrupting properties of glyphosate can lead to reproductive problems, a multitude of them: infertility, miscarriage, birth defects, etc. And I mean, this is really, really sad, and this is obviously the target of some people that really want a lower population and have an interest in poisoning the population. As we know, and we've discussed before, the larger picture is the intent behind a lot of these programs. Barb, we're out of time. We really appreciate all of the work and research that you're doing, and I encourage our listeners, farmwars.info, a wealth of information, especially on information of defending the family farm, our ability to grow clean, good organic food, and the threats that are coming to us by monopoly corporations with private banking interest to take control allocate what we can eat into the future. Barb, thanks very much for joining us. We really appreciate your time.
No problem. Anytime, Leon.